Alright, so I decided to make some audio on this one, and this is just a poly reduction. So what I'm going to do is take my high poly and convert it into a low poly that we can then use to lay out UVs and then bake our normal maps. I have the playback speed on this one set to be about double, so it's going to go a little quick. The first thing I'm doing is I'm kind of duplicating my object, and I'm going to create a couple of layers. One layer for high, one layer for low, so that I can lock and kind of make my high poly transparent and see that, make sure I'm keeping the shape and the volume of the low poly very close to the high poly, but getting rid of whatever I don't need. Then I'm just kind of going to pull the pieces apart and delete kind of some unused geometry. And this back piece, what I'm going to do is go and take about every other line where I've made these bevels and just delete all the kind of the same geometry, some of the fencing lines, some of the bevels, reduce them, merge some vertices together. The idea here is that I'm just trying to really get rid of all the extraneous geometry that will not affect the silhouette or the profile of the object, but that really contribute towards having a high polygon count. The idea being that, when we have a normal map, none of this will really matter too much, but we just want to make sure that that silhouette stays pretty good. I am going to leave this little edge here. I'm going to merge those vertices together, and I'm going to leave the extra border edge on the top face, just because it may help prevent some shading errors later on. So that's just this one side. Go ahead and fence this back in, merge some things together, just kind of tidy it up. One thing to note, because I'm not going to be animating this object, triangles are okay. There's not going to be any deformation going on, so going quads, triangles is pretty good. Depending on your engine, you may even want to just go ahead and do a mesh triangulate before you bake your normals. Sometimes that can really help prevent shading errors. So now I'm going to take this little cylinder piece and get rid of what I don't need. And then, because the top of that cylinder is actually going to be tucked in, I'm going to merge every other line, so I can cut down the number of sides on the cylinder by half, and then go back through and do the same thing here, so that, because you're never really going to see that, there's very little chance you're ever going to see the silhouette of the roundness of that top cylindrical piece. So I'm just going to create some lines, make these triangles. Probably leave them and have my auto do it, but reduce that. Alright, so this bottom piece here, go ahead and, again, where I've got these fences or bevels, go ahead and remove every other line, kind of just reduce it down. Biggest problem is going to be with all these cylindrical shapes. Cylindrical round shapes always have require you to do a higher polygon count. Go ahead and delete all the buttons. They're just going to be baked in detail. For this top piece, because it's all curvy, it's going to be a case where you're really going to have to kind of play it by eye, what you can get rid of and what you need to keep. So I tried some poly reduce. I think I just stepped it down to about 80%, and it kind of took care of some stuff, but then I think I decided to do it manually. Sometimes the new Maya poly reduce can be very useful, sometimes, and sometimes it isn't quite smart enough. So just taking out every other edge, that did a good job of reducing it down. And then really getting in here and taking out some of the more subtle curves. This is also a place where you can really cheat more on the inside of a curve, on the concave surface, than on the convex. The outer round you kind of need to hold on to sometimes a little more, because you'll see that in your silhouette. Just as a tip, and I'll do this a little later, use the 7 key. If you don't have any lights in your scene, use 7 just to be able to poke and look at your silhouette kind of at a glance. So some of this is just exploring, finding edges. The other thing that I can do is Here I'm creating 2 new edge loops using the insert with edge flow option. So it kind of maintains my edge flow, but it throws a loop in between. And what that allows me to do is create an edge along the surface and then delete maybe 2 edges that were kind of fencing that. So it's sort of a situation where I'm creating an edge in order to get rid of 2 other edge loops that were spaced a little bit more apart. So that's kind of a first pass on that. I'm going to pull the top off here. Go ahead and delete these fencing edges. Ideally, I would not have gone and poly reduced this off of the high poly. I would have used a kind of a mid poly, and before I did all the bevels and stuff, and just reduce that down to a low poly. It saves a lot of trouble. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm adding a split along those edges. The reason on those bevels, the reason being I needed something where I can make sure I had perfectly mirrorable geometry, to where it was those corners there make up the border edge for a single quad section, and so I would really need to hold on to that. The other stuff, however, I can now kind of get rid of. Kind of clean up some of these areas where it is flat. Get rid of any extraneous geometry that I can. Yeah, I don't need that inside there. Don't need those. Again, it's just kind of getting rid of some of these fencing edges. Anything where the angle does not change, or else you have a lot of geometry and can afford maybe a little more jagged curve. You can delete some geometry. What I'm going to do is that was a display, heads-up display polygon count, and it has on the one side, on the far left, it has total scene polygon count, which you're looking at, and then the inside is your selected object. In total, I'm trying to keep this wall sconce under about 3,000. It's just sort of a good ballpark number, which is still ridiculously high for a wall prop, but I think, with this object, I think $3,000 seemed to work pretty well, considering the number of curvy shapes and all. So here I'm just taking out some of that detail block along this corner, because that's just going to be baked detail. Select these edges and then bridge them all together. Get rid of that extra face here. Yeah. So again, some of the subtle detail, don't need it. It's just for display purposes. So go ahead and delete that. Go ahead and split an edge loop in the middle, because again, I want the full face versus just the corner. That'll work out much better when we're unwrapping our UVs. So I'll go ahead and add that split loop just like I did with the cat piece. And then this is just kind of a matter of cleaning some things up. And again, deleting the extra geometry if I can kind of get rid of it. This is a bevel. It's a large enough bevel that you could kind of notice it in the bake, but I figured I'd go ahead and just merge that to center. Yeah, that's the other way of doing it. Split it right down the middle, delete the 2 edge loops. And this is just kind of merging, again, the more subtle stuff. Just trying to reduce that poly count. And continuously hit the Windows key. Alright, yeah, just basically redrawing the bottom face down there. What's going to need to happen is kind of split it off as a little triangle, one half to the other. Get rid of that bevel. Again, sometimes it also helps to get away from the object a little bit. Zoom way out to where if you were playing a game, or if it was part of the architecture, how big would it be on the screen? Well, if it's, if you're not ever going to have the player get close to it, you can get rid of a lot more geometry than even this. But I kind of wanted to make this as a something to kind of show off just a little bit. So, you know, having little more geometry can help with the bake. So clean some of these up. Yeah. See, again, if they're planar, like if the geometry is planar, you know, minimize the number of edge loops, minimize whatever you need, and just kind of get rid of it. Again, the main thing is hold on to that profile, which we'll be checking on here after a while. This edge here, I made this cut across the top, or I'm making this cut across the top because I know the cap is going to fit on there, and we don't need all that geometry going all the way back. That'll just be buried geometry that's going to be taking up texture space. So by making an extra face there, we can really push that to the edge of where the cap meets it, and then that way it'll work out as a better piece of geometry. Here on these side pieces, the kicker here is I really want to make sure that we only had half, that they were perfectly mirrorable. This will be very, very useful for our UV layout. So I'm just kind of going to split some of these down the side. And this is kind of a pain because for some reason when it extruded down, for some reason my edge loop number, either something was off, and so the top piece, one of them is perfectly aligned with the center, the other one kind of has a line that's an edge that's not really aligned with the center. Plus you have the caps, and they don't want to select edge loops down the caps, so selecting this was a little bit of a trick. But my idea here was just find the one edge where I want to divide it and delete that so that I have half of it kind of separated, delete that, and then set her back up to the center or right along a grid, and then I want to select the edge here. There you go. Set up. There we go. All right, set it up, select that whole border edge, and then deselect the two ends. I think that ended up working out a lot better. Yeah. Yes, just like that. See? And then scale it, and then snap it. Now that is